Everybody, and welcome again to another edition of Parents Canada Talk Radio here on News Talk Saga 960. I am Jason Thompson. I'm here with the wonderful
Lisa Durante.
Lisa, how's it going?
It's good. How about you?
You know, I'm finding that these episodes are literally changing the way I parent. And people are saying, well, if you want to give one piece of advice from the show, what would the piece of advice you give? I said, it's this. Get your own radio show. Because what it does is it forces you to stop the only parenting in the minute, right? Parenting and reacting. Mm-hmm. And really challenges you to think a whole lot bigger about how it is. I call it like that porch conversation that you have when you were 70, when you are 70, okay. And you said... Sorry, I didn't mean to age you there. When you step back and you're like, hey, how did I handle this, or how did I approach this? That, when we're talking about things like, are we killing imagination in childhood, and how do we deal with social media and things like that, that I take a step back and I think to myself, how is it that I really approach this? And, we receive a kind of a bundle of information from our producer every week to help us understand the topic and kind of start diving in. And I found this week's topic in particular was one where I went, wow, I never thought about this. And when I did, I thought about it a little bit differently. So why don't you take us into this week's show?
Yeah, so we are talking about food, family and food. And I think I've said a couple times on this show that my background's Italian. And so if there's anything in the Italian culture, it's food. It truly is the epicenter of everything we are and everything we do. For us, food is community, it's family, it's love. And so I am so excited to talk about this. And later on in the show, we're going to be joined by Lori McLorn, who is the newest member of the Saga 960 family with her new show, Chewin the Fat. But before we bring Lori in, I'd really like to know your approach, Jason. How do you approach food with your family?
This is, and I'm struggling a little bit already because I think sometimes badly. And again, this is the sort of thing where we may beat ourselves up as a parent a little bit, and that's the underlying tone here is everybody, it's okay, it's going to be okay sort of thing. But I sat down and I thought, how many full out meals, dinners have we sat at a table for over the course of this summer? And it hasn't been many. Now, part of that is it's summer. Okay. But part of it is in my family, it's not the sitting around the table is where we prioritize. It is the development of the food. The place that we spend our time is in food prep. So on like Sundays, we might get together in a best case scenario, and this happens more, I think, in the fall and the winter. We make soups, we make breakfast burritos and freeze them and all that sort of stuff. But and that's where we have a lot of conversations, a lot of development time, a lot of joy and that sort of thing. But it's the sitting around the table for me, and it was surprising. Like, it was surprising when I sat down and I thought about how other families enjoy food, that this was a very different experience. And I'm still not quite sure if is it a time thing? We don't have a priority around it sort of thing? Are we trying to get to other things in our life sort of thing? I'm not quite sure. In fact, as I'm saying this out loud, like I'm thinking about in the fall, I mean, the kids are in so many extracurricular activities, at that 5 to 6 or 7 p.m. range, it does seem like a bit of a rush.
Yeah. Like I'm with you on the food prep. I do food prep every Sunday. I just love it. I will bake up a bunch of muffins or make soups, like you said, and all of that stuff. And many times bring in the kids, especially when it's the baking, because they just love to bake anything. I think it's mainly because then they get to, taste test as we're doing it. But if the family meal coming together to the table is very important to us. But I will say that I've struggled, just what you were saying, with the activities. I really struggled this past school year. So my daughters are both starting off in competitive swimming. And so that means practice is 3-4 times a week. And this past year, we had dinner less and less. And starting from when they were babies, we always had dinner together. And it was only on holiday this past summer that we started to notice that there's a few problems that are coming up because we weren't having dinner together. My daughters, their diet and their palate has kind of become much more limited because by me just cooking them dinner right before their practice, they're kind of eating the same dishes over and over again.
Right.
And so usually when we cook as a family, when I cook for all of us, it's going to be foods that I enjoy and my husband enjoys. And so we're kind of helping them expand their palate. But when it's just me, I'm cooking like a quick pasta dish or, an egg frittata or whatever. And so it's very limited. And so we noticed that. But then the other thing we noticed is that there was also this lack of connection, and we pinpointed it to this lack of not having dinner together, that we weren't connecting as a family. And so my two daughters were bickering more because they weren't actually talking to each other. So it was always this, there was a lot of conflict happening. And my husband and I would, be in the car driving them to their practice. So there would be a lot of me time saying, how was your day? And my husband didn't get that benefit, so he had no idea that, one of our daughters was struggling with a friend at school. And he started making play dates with them. And I'm like, no, not a good time. And so there was that connection that was missing. And then the thing that we really noticed when we were on holiday, because we were eating out at restaurants, table manners were atrocious. And we were so embarrassed at times. And so over the summer, the last couple of weeks, we've been really trying to get us back to the table. And it hasn't been easy because it has been, okay, sit down. You have to sit on your knees or on your bum. Like you can't stand and walk around when you're eating. And so there's just so many benefits of coming around the table. And I saw that. I saw the downfall of us not doing it more. So that's something that I'm going to keep focusing on. And there are other benefits to, really focusing on food. And you had said it, Jason, where you can have that time to talk about food when you're making it, like
right.
the nutritional value of food and what's healthy and all of that.
Do you find that's a big thing? Like I grew up in the 70s. So this was, a diet, a good diet included orange juice. It included a lot of shake and bake, too much shake. I can't even eat it to this day, right? Because it just brings up these terrible, I know my mom's in Burlington right now just cringing going, but you loved it at the time. And, but because of that, because we didn't have, I think, a good understanding of what the impact of food was, the reverence that I try and create for my kids around it. We have a formula, for example, for lunches, right? So I get my kids to make their own lunches probably from the time that they're 7 or 8 years old. And the rule is this, okay? Because if I'm not careful, they're all going to just, load in yogurt or, things that I'm not going to be too thrilled about. It helps not putting a lot of that in front of them. But the rule is this: 2 fruits, 1 vegetable, 1 protein, and 1 carbohydrate. So those are the big things in the overall approach. And it's really important because I have the pseudo blended family approach to things. And I was talking to Lori earlier, and I said, dinners could be a nightmare at my house because I had a vegan, a vegetarian, a very very picky eater, one kid who seemed like they would only eat meat. So I started cooking for the zone, right? Which is to say, we would create assembly meals, an assembly meal like tacos, right? To say, okay, we're putting all of the pieces out there. So if you're the vegetarian, you might want to have beans and that sort of stuff. So and that works. But the thing is it can somewhat seem finite when you're trying to balance, getting good nutrition for them and at the same time doing this quickly so we can get them off to skating lessons, swimming lessons, or whatnot.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. The benefit of having a Mediterranean diet is the plentifulness of vegetables that you grow up with. Like you just grow up with minestrone on Monday nights, you just got to eat it. Like there was just, you would sit there until it was cold and then you'd eat it.
I think you've just created the thing. It's Taco Tuesday, but it's Minestrone Monday. So there you go.
Yeah, I think it's just all over Italy on Mondays. It's minestrone.
Really?
Yeah, I think it's because the Sunday lunch is so big that you need to have something. You need to have something lighter and really nutritious.
That's good.
On Mondays.
Soup is, to me, that's the unheralded super thing, right? Because you can create it, you can freeze it, and it tastes so much better than the stuff in the stores, and it gives the kids the full nutrition, right?
Yeah, and if you blend up some of it, they don't even know that it's in there. They can't pick and complain and say, "Oh, this is green. I don't eat green things."
Lori's going to tell us a great story, actually, in a little bit about how she fooled her own daughter into some of this sort of stuff. Her daughter, who's now a great foodie and eating at some of the best restaurants in the world now.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. Well, I think that's so. Like as a child, when you are exposed to different foods, you develop your palate, and then you start to prefer certain foods over others. And so soups are big in our house too, because I can blend them and then hide things. I make a lentil soup, and my daughter she rails against it, can't stand it. And so one night I just blended it up. And then she was like, this is the best soup. What is it? And I'm like, lentils. So,
that's the real secret, is just don't tell them. Don't tell them until they get. And it's interesting, 'cause, like, I have, one of my kids who essentially would only eat white rice, it felt like, until she was 6 or 7 years old. And then the other one who was, scarfing sashimi at 2 and wouldn't put it down.
Awesome.
It's a difficult thing when, they develop their personalities, but trying to kind of find a way to balance. Because, the old adages that we had when we were kids, right? Like, you have to sit there until you finish the meal. And we've learned as adults now in kind of the modern generation, that's actually a dangerous path to, food eating issues and disorders and things like that. So, I find food to be we all want to do the right thing around food, but sometimes it feels like things are shifting so quickly, or the general, there's that commercial that was on earlier this year for one of the insurance companies where they have the old hockey players, and like the new hockey players are like eating, drinking protein shakes and that sort of stuff, and then they cut to the old hockey players and they're just downing spaghetti, and it's like, what, you guys don't carbo load? And it's like, when was the last time you heard that phrase, right? But that sort of shift makes it sometimes a little bit difficult to stay on top of things.
Yeah, well, just even that shift, because I'm the first generation born Canadian, so my brothers and my parents both were emigrated from Italy, and I think this, and I've heard this is true for a lot of families who are, that they're second generation or first generation, however you want to label it, that you shift a step away from your culture, and so coming back to the food is a way to create that connection. And now my kids are 2 steps away, and so by bringing them in, because we make a lot of food, I don't make nearly as much as my mother does, and when I say make, I mean from scratch, like making pasta and all that stuff. I don't make as much as she does, but I'm trying to do the things that I truly enjoy and that I can work into our weekly or monthly schedule. So, like, we make pasta. So we'll make pasta from scratch, and I get them, and it's something that's fun for them, that they can knead the dough and then use the crank on the machine, and they can cut the pasta to the shape that they like and all that. But then it's also a way to teach them about their culture and why we do this, and how their grandmother did this, and how their great-grandmother did this, and just the stories. And then I'm maybe even able to share stories of me making it with, not my mother, because my mother was very particular and didn't allow me into any kitchen or any space. But my grandmother, like, I do remember making ravioli with my grandmother, and so then I can share that story with my kids. Although my kids make food with my mother, and I just shake my head each and every time. I'm like, how do you have patience for your grandchildren but never for your daughter?
Well, you know me about my podcast, The Knowledge Project. I listened to one yesterday where they were talking about exactly that concept of why it's easier to be a grandparent than a parent. And, you mentioned the idea about being embarrassed when you're out. And they said the funny thing about why we get upset at our kids around tables when we're out for dinner often isn't because they're technically doing something wrong. It's the way it reflects on us as parents. And
totally.
So I find, so that's why it's so much easier for your mom to cook with the kids, because the game is a whole lot. There's a lot less at stake for her.
And she has just greater patience for them than she did for me.
What I do find really interesting is, we have a listenership that has a lot of new Canadians in it, and so that idea of using kind of food around the table as a bond back to your heritage and that sort of thing, that's a really great idea.
Well, and I think that most do that. Like they and it's traditional meals and all of that. Like, Sunday lunch is huge. I don't go nearly enough to my in-laws or to my mother's every Sunday to enjoy in the Sunday lunch. But that's just a big thing. And then there's just all the holidays, the Christmas, the Christmas Eve, the New Year's Day, the Easter, and on and on and on. That there are specific dishes that are held that we serve at those meals. And so that too kind of reinforces your culture and connects you back.
That's interesting. You might horrify you to know that I haven't celebrated Thanksgiving in about 7 years now. I'm cooking that. I just find the effort to be annoying, and we actually spend time in each other's company in a different way. So,
that's good. Yeah, Thanksgiving's not a huge holiday for me because it's just not culturally. But my mother always made turkey, and it's only in the last 2 years that I've made a turkey because my daughters went to school. My older daughter went to school one year. She was like, everybody had turkey yesterday. How come we didn't? I was like, oh, we got to get on that. So now we do. Yeah.
So now we do.
Now we do.
I love that transition from the laughter to the, and so now we do.
Now we do it.
It's like, okay, back into parent mode.
Yeah. You want to embed them in your culture, but at the same time, you have to remind them and give them the Canadian experience. And so you have to balance it. So you are listening to Parents Canada Talk Radio on News Talk Saga 960. We're going to be coming back with Lori McLorn, and we're going to be talking more about food and family. So if you want to join the conversation, hit us up on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram at Parents Canada, or give us a call at 416-640-0200. We'll be back. Hello and welcome back. You're listening to Parents Canada Talk Radio on News Talk Saga 960. So I want to welcome Lori McLorn to the studio. She's actually here.
Well, thank you very much for having me.
So Lori is an executive chef, and she has had quite the experience. One of them, as you were just saying, is that you used to cater private jets, which just sounds so fascinating to me. Yeah.
Yeah, it actually was. I was working in doing catering, and it was on December 23rd, and that's obviously the busiest time of year for us. And we were just going crazy. And my boss said to me, I just got the weirdest phone call. I said, who was it? She goes, well, it's some guy wants an egg salad sandwich sent to the airport. And I'm like, are you kidding me? No, we're busy. You mean just one sandwich? And he said, yeah, just one. So she hung up. I said, well, who was it? Well, I don't know, some private jet company. And I said, you call them back right now. So all because of an egg salad sandwich.
That's how you got your start.
That's how we got the start in it.
Oh, that's amazing.
So that should be the opening line of your bio. An egg salad sandwich that changed the world.
Yeah.
Now, you would think they'd want filet mignon and soufflés and, all that kind of stuff. But no, a lot of them, especially the older money, they really want comfort food. They're by themselves and they can just kind of, get away from it all and have a little comfort.
Food psychologist to the skies. There's your right there.
Yeah. And so, Lori, you are also starting, I think it's tomorrow, right? At 11 a.m.
Yes, tomorrow
Chewin
morning.
the Fat. You will be hosting a new show. Did you want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Yeah. I am just trying to give a shout out to everyone in the hospitality industry, the food industry, and just to let open the doors and let's find out what happens behind the kitchen. So it will relate to people in the business, but also for the recreational chef at home.
Oh, good.
And so we'll give some points and advice for stuff like that. And also I'm going to be having some local and celebrity chef interviews as well.
Ooh.
And
they're not all like Gordon Ramsay, right?
Oh, no. Just some of them.
Some of them.
Of course, they'd never admit to that, right? I'd actually have to talk to the staff.
Apparently, it's an affected persona. What I hear about him is he's an amazing person. And
That's what I hear, too.
There's a classic story about him being on Reddit and somebody saying, hey, how do I get started in the business? And he's like, come by my restaurant, I'll give you a job. Like, how awesome is that, right?
Yeah.
And then on air,
great.
he's yelling. So no yelling is what you're saying for your show.
Yeah. Well, I won't be yelling.
Yeah. So before the break, we were talking about food and family and all that comes with it. And so we just, we wanted to keep the conversation going and really hear from your perspective as an executive chef, but also as a mom yourself, and to share with us. And so I think, Jason, you wanted to get started.
Sure. I mean, Lisa talked about this idea of how critical the idea of sitting around the table is for social development, for confidence and things like that. I mean, from your perspective, Lori, why do you feel that food is such an important element to the family experience?
Well, number one, you got to eat. And number two, I just think it's great. And Lisa, like you had said earlier about it's communal, it's family, it's your chance to finally wind down and get to know each other and get up on current events and also, get back to that bonding time again. And if you think about it, in the days of even the caveman, when they were cooking, well, nobody was sitting in their tents while someone's cooking by the fire. Everybody's there around the fire, waiting for it to cook, and this is when they had their time together to share.
Yeah, one of the, like Jason was saying earlier, we get a lot of great information that is sent our way to prepare for the show. And one of the things that I read, which was a bit troubling for me because that community is so important, is that I think it's about over 3/4 of Canadians eat meals alone. And so why is the dinner table, really important? And especially now with social media, there's so many more ways to connect, and yet we feel more disconnected.
Oh, yeah, that's so true. I was saying to Jason yesterday that I walked past my dining room, my beautiful dining room table and dining room set, and I put my finger across it and there's dust on it. And it's like, this is so sad. How long has it been since we sat at this table? Yeah, we just need to, I think the media, multimedia now has just captured everybody. And even if you look at when you go out for dinner or sitting at the table, everybody's got their phones in their hand. Me, guilty of it too, I'm sorry to say. But
are we watching cooking shows at the time? Is that what you're doing?
Yeah. I have been, there have been times last week, both of my kids were away at camp, and so my husband and I went out to dinner. And he sat there with his phone, and I said, "No, please not tonight." I'm like, "It's finally our time that we can have dinner together." I'm like, "Can you just put it down, put it away, and let's talk?" Yeah, and you're seeing it more and more that they're just right by the fork is the phone.
That's right.
Which is crazy.
No, it really is.
It's funny. I was thinking about that. I made the joke about the cooking show. What I realized to my 8-year-old, what we do is probably once a week we sit down and we watch this YouTube series called Binging with Babish. I don't know if you've ever seen it. It is a phenomenal cooking show because the twist on it is that he cooks fictional foods. So, like, for example, he'll cook something from the television show Bob's Burgers. So he'll see a burger that's on the show, and like with black truffle and that sort of stuff, and he'll recreate it. Or if you think about, I think he had spaghetti from Scarface and like all these different kind of things that might be your favorite media properties. So my daughter and I, we watch it, and then of course we get super hungry and we think, you know what, let's make that a thing we do. And so we do, probably once every couple of weeks. We made the pancakes from a 90s TV show. I can't remember what the TV show was. She had no idea what the TV show was, but the experience together of watching the show, deconstructing it, going out and buying the ingredients for it, and then going in is a great thing. I really love that. It's funny. I mentioned to you on the phone yesterday that the kitchen almost becomes like a microcosm for all of the things around parenting, around confidence and things like that. And I was mentioning the idea about when we do this, when we create these things, that I'm trying to teach my kids how to properly use the tools in the kitchen. I have one who's deathly afraid of knives, and I explained to her, if you're afraid of a knife, that actually can cost you. You need to really understand how to use the tool effectively. So just Lori, from your perspective, why is it important or how do kids develop, confidence in the kitchen?
Well, yeah, that's a very good point. I think first and foremost, you have to teach them the safety aspect of whatever utensil that you're going to give them to use, and to not be afraid of it. And, just give them the pointers on how to be careful with all of that, for sure. And, and work along with them. And also, if they end up breaking an egg on the floor, it's not a big deal. Like, you're allowed to make mistakes, but you just have to be safe and you have to watch first. And I'm going to show you the good points and the bad points of how this can.
You also talked about, from that confidence perspective, about kind of giving them a canvas. You talked about pizza. This idea of like letting kids kind of generate whatever it is that they want. Yeah,
when I used to, another career part I had was I was working in a cooking school. So during the times when we were teaching either the kids in the school or had a birthday party, I would get every kind of ingredient imaginable and put it out, because there's also, a lot of ethnic diversity in the classrooms too. So if somebody grew up with black beans and this little child didn't, now they had that opportunity to try and put it on their pizzas. And it was really cool. And one of the things I loved was fresh basil. And I'd ask them what it was, and they wouldn't know. And then I would say to them, okay, now I'm going to put this under your nose, and I want you to close your eyes, and I want you to smell this. And they're like, oh, wow, that's beautiful. Oh, yeah. And so then they all took fresh basil on their pizza, which was, you wouldn't get that happening at home, but
Yeah.
here it did.
Yeah. Pizza making is a great one in our house. My youngest she's a budding baker and she just loves being in the kitchen. And so pizzas are Sunday nights. And so there are so many times where it will be like a Friday night or even after school. She would say, I have an idea for Sunday's pizza.
That's awesome.
And,
That's great.
And then she's like, we just need these ingredients. And I'm like, okay. And oftentimes what she's been doing lately is she's like, can we put Nutella on it? And I'm like, no, honey, we're not going to put
Dessert
Nutella
pizza.
on it.
Dessert pizza's great.
We've made it, but, it's supposed to be dinner. I can't always
But,
put
this
Nutella.
brings up probably the most important question we've ever asked on this show, which is pineapple, yes or no?
I don't mind pineapple.
See, me neither. Watch the phones light up.
I know. I don't mind it.
Yeah, once in a while.
Once in a while. It has to be with the right ingredients, though. I
That's
don't
right.
mind it. And I've even, on dessert pizzas, thrown strawberries and all that stuff. One of the things, and Jason, you had just touched upon it, was the confidence. And, one of the things that if you're speaking to educators, they say that there's rising numbers in mental health issues among kids, anxiety, depression, and all of that. And my youngest daughter had some, I guess they termed it anxiety because she was just having some social issues at school this past year. And her, the doctor, her pediatrician said, have you thought of getting her to do something with her hands? And a couple of weeks ago, we had Sherry Holmes on the show, and she had talked about how getting kids involved in trades, getting them to use their hands really does a lot to bolster their confidence. And I myself find that if I'm feeling quite nervous about something, I will bake and it kind of numbs my mind and it's very meditative for me. And there have been a lot of positives with my kids being in the kitchen and helping them with their anxiety. Have you seen any or know of anything around how cooking can help with that, with mental health issues or anything like that?
Well, I think that it is a great way for kids to feel empowered when they're in there. One thing that during the cooking classes with the kids is they were fascinated with measuring cups and measuring spoons and bowls. So even if you went to the dollar store and got them their own set on their own little area in the
That's
kitchen,
such a good idea.
then they can open up the door. Okay, I'm going to help. And things like, let's say they don't like carrots, but you let them get exposed to, shaving the carrot with a peeler and adding it to the dinner. And now when Dad comes home, it's like, look what I made, and then they'll be more, responsive to eat it as well because they'll want to try it.
Yeah. And that's a great way to get them to expose to different foods.
I love that idea of empowering them because when they take ownership, and we see this in the corporate world as well, you get someone to take ownership, they will actually move forward. I'm going to pause this here. We're going to come back after the break, and we're going to keep hanging around with Lori and talk about some of the issues that we were able to surface on social media. By the way, if you want to share some of your social media stuff, reach out. We're at Parents Canada. We're on all the good stuff. We're on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. You can also call us. We're at 416-640-0200. We're going to be back right after this break on Saga 960. Welcome back to Parents Canada Talk Radio on News Talk Saga 960. It's amazing. We were just having a conversation. You got to try to remember all that sort of stuff. And we're all new. All three of us in the booth are fairly new at the radio life. So, we're getting good at that. But I'll tell you what we are good at. We're good at talking about food and what we can really accomplish with that, how we have stories, and really there's so much that's kind of swimming through my head right now on what we've learned today. We got some interesting feedback, I think, from our listeners. We reach out, Lisa and I, each week on social media to see what we can pull out. I know you did a poll.
Yeah, I did a couple of polls, and then that kind of spurred some questions to come our way. So, Lori, maybe you can help us with that. So one of the things that people were talking about was, 60% right now is saying that it's really tough for them to have a family meal together. And so one of the questions that came in was, how can I actually make this easier for me at home? So do you have any tips that you come from the professional kitchen that we can take home to make things a bit easier for us?
Well, maybe you can suggest that they come shopping with you, and you give them the list and let them go and try and find the items. That's a good start, and then come home and participate with the cooking. I mean, like I said, even if you have to buy them a tool, that's their own, or their own cookbook or their own apron or something to make them feel special and included. I think that's a good start.
And how about for the moms and dads who are making the meal? How can they make it go a bit faster, especially if you're thinking of working parents? They're dashing in after 5 o'clock and they got to feed their kids quickly thereafter. Any tips on how can we make that process quicker?
Well, make it quicker by maybe having them do things like grate the cheese, or something along that line, where they're going to be doing something for the end of the cooking the dish, right? Then they can help out that way. They're kind of out of the way, but they're still included in helping. They can sit at the table and do it, or chop the celery or the onion or something.
Yeah, get
one of the things
involved.
we do actually is this kind of food prep Sunday. There's a great subreddit called Meal Prep Sunday, and the whole concept is every Sunday, and let's be honest here. As a parent, I do try it every Sunday, and we get into a run and then we get out of a run. But every Sunday we choose a thing. This Sunday it's soups. This Sunday it's sauces. This Sunday it's breakfast burritos that you can wrap up and freeze and that sort of stuff. But the idea is that the freezer gets full in the end of good quality stuff. It doesn't. In the end, it actually saves so much time to be able to kind of just run in on a Tuesday night before dance recital and that sort of stuff and say, okay, guys, we're having burritos for dinner tonight, and then just pulling a couple from the fridge. They're fresh, good ingredients and things like that. And at the same time, then you don't feel like a guilty parent, and everybody's good. Everybody's happy. The challenge is, dedicating and committing that time, which on Sundays sometimes can be good. I find when the weather gets a little cooler, it becomes a whole lot like a trigger.
Yeah.
But my freezer's empty right now. So
Yeah. One of the things I do is I meal plan. So on Saturdays, usually, I will figure out what it is that I'm going to make for the week, and then and I usually do that right before my shop, and then I shop for all the ingredients. And on Sundays, in addition to bulk making, I will then actually chop up my vegetables. And I don't do it as much now, but I used to, especially when I worked full-time outside the home. I would put everything into Ziploc bags or, Tupperware, so that all the ingredients, so if I was making a stir fry, for example, all the ingredients, all the vegetables that I needed were in that Tupperware sealed. The only thing that I would always save is the garlic, because it would just make everything stinky. And so kind of just have everything ready so that when I came home, it was literally just pulling it out of the fridge and then getting it into the pan.
Yeah, we do that too.
Yeah,
it's a really powerful and useful thing. You have a daughter who's 20 now, right? So how did you kind of manage that growing up?
Yeah, she's going to be 22 actually.
22.
Since she was a kid, I think 3 years old, I just had her in the kitchen with me, cooking along. So, yeah, she helped,
and now this is the real litmus test, right? Hey, I had my kids in the kitchen from the time that they were 3. How does she approach food now? Does she like food? Does she cook? Does she spend time at nice restaurants? I'm leading you along here.
Yes, I know. Actually, yeah, she is has been great at growing up knowing food. Like, I feel sorry if she has a boyfriend that wants to take her to a restaurant for dinner, because she'll be like, oh, been there, done that. Yeah, she has quite the palate now, let me tell you.
Good.
She just got back from England, and she went out and had high tea, and she went to the oldest restaurant in London called Rules, and it's 400 years old. And
cool.
She likes fine stuff.
Good chicken wings there?
I wouldn't know. Yeah. She goes to all the fancy chocolate places and everything, and she is
true foodie.
Quite a foodie. Yes,
but that's a great, there's a great demonstration, and I think, Lisa, the same thing from you is you created such a healthy environment around cooking and food as an outcome that there's really kind of a positive thing as an adult. You make an adult who reveres and enjoys food. And I'm saying this out loud, I'm getting slower, and I'm like, have I done that? Am I doing a good job? This is that perfect parent panic moment.
Yeah, that's the hope. So I know you've talked about your son going off to school, and, growing up, it was just, you were given this food, and it was delicious food every night by my mother or my grandmother, and then you kind of go off on your own. And I remember the first time that I was off on my own, I called my mother, I'm like, okay, I have to make some food, and I want it to taste good. How is this going to happen? Right. And so she had to kind of walk me through stuff, because my palate was so used to certain foods, and then all of a sudden I was like, well, what do I make other than eggs? So I think that's the hope, is, I'm crossing my fingers, that if I teach my kids now, that they will come back to it. Because I don't doubt that there's going to be teenage years where it's just going to be full of whatever the fast food restaurant of choice will be. And you've kind of got to just let them go with it, right?
It's interesting that you mentioned this idea of, like looking at my son, who's like 3 weeks away from heading off to university, is over the summer I've really invest the time to say, here is how you get at good nutrition and enjoyment quickly. And Lori, I know we talked about it. I said, what kind of advice that you gave to me, you'd give to me. And the first word is the first word that every parent dreads when they send their kids off to university, which is, you're going to be dealing with a lot of ramen. But that's not the worst case scenario. So you want to walk me through that?
Well, the ramen noodles, there's 101 different ways to make it. And if they're going to eat it, you just have to encourage that, they put things like shaved carrots or broccoli or onion or pork, leftover chicken wings, take the chicken off the bone. Anything that's just going to add, some nutrition to it, is probably a good thing to do.
It's one of the things I've actually recommended to him. I said, one of the best, smartest deals going in the grocery store that can be a bit of a lifesaver are those pre-made chickens, right? It's because you can pick them off the bone, right. You can use them in soup, and we do. We actually, find that for, between $7 and $12, depending on where you buy them, is that they can be a real lifesaver, because they're not, they're not deep fried. They're actually a positive addition and then, we build a salad around it, those are the things. But what I've encouraged them to do is, if you're going to eat ramen, make sure you got a chicken in there, and label the chicken with your name so your roommate doesn't take it. That's a key one right there.
And the date on it, too.
Wait,
I didn't know chickens were supposed to be green. Another really great thing, too, is like my daughter, when she went into university, she started cooking, and it was great, because she'd send me pictures of, oh, Mom, I just sauteed some bok choy with some chili, and I added this, and I added that, and it's like, really? Very, very, very impressive. But one of the things I think is a great helper for the family as well is Pinterest. And if they do the food, and now you can share with each other, or just, now with your daughters, we're looking at pizza, thinking, okay, well, get them to go on Pinterest and see maybe there's a really unique way, or an extra vegetable, or something that we haven't thought about, an ingredient that we haven't thought about. And it has really been an encouragement. So,
if there were, like, let's say 5 things I can encourage him to put in his, encourage him. We're going out shopping in a couple days. So what are the 5 things we should be putting in his pantry to make sure that he's, to keep Dad feeling like maybe he's not going to just, go and eat on the meal cart constantly?
Well, I think things like canned either chickpeas or black beans would be a good one.
Black beans are good.
And I asked my daughter the question last night, and she said, well, you get things like you make a fruit bowl, so you get bananas, oranges, apples, things that you do enjoy. Right. And then she says those will last you throughout the week. It's a good grab and go, especially if you're between classes or having a late night.
That grab and go mindset cool. is a really good one. And if you can, what I'm trying to encourage them to do is to mix in, like I said, look, if you're going to eat chips, for example, right, be strategic about it, be proactive about it. Say, I'm going to have chips on Friday, as opposed to just kind of doing it as you graze, because that's where stuff can add up in a bad way and have an unhealthy relationship with things.
Yeah. Especially if it's in front of you, that's awfully tempting,
Yeah. Even if it's behind the door of a cupboard, it's still awfully tempting.
I'm sure we could sit here all day and talk about this. So let's do one more plug for the show tomorrow. Tell us what we're going to learn on your first episode tomorrow, and then we're going to head to break.
Okay, well, I think they're going to learn a lot about me to begin with, because they're probably saying, who the heck is Lori McLorn? Where did she come from out of the woodwork, right? So, yeah, I'm going to give some of that. And also, we've got a few really great festivals coming up this weekend in and around Mississauga. So I'm going to promote those for sure.
Great.
Yeah, and just...
I know I'm hungry now. I want to go to Lori's place so she can, we can have lunch
cook a
with
little
her.
bit.
That would be. I'd learn so much.
Yeah, so Lori, tell us once again, when does Chewin the Fat air?
Tomorrow at 11 a.m. from 11 till 12.
So Thursdays.
Yes,
That's great.
on Thursdays, every Thursday.
So excited. I'll definitely be listening. So
Well, thank you.
are listening, and thank you so much. But
you.
before we actually go, is there any place where people can find you online? Do you have a website, or are you on social media where they can connect with you?
Yes, as of tomorrow, they'll have. Yeah.
And
That'll be all set up. I certainly will.
So you are listening to Parents Canada Radio on News Talk Saga 960, and we'll be back right after this. And welcome back. You're listening to Parents Canada Talk Radio on News Talk Saga 960. So, Jason, this has been another really great show. And I have to say, I was surprised that we're at the end because it's just been such a great conversation.
Food goes by fast, right?
Yeah. So what would you say, what are you taking away from today? What did you learn?
This is the one show I think that is every parent who listens to every show, like there's going to be a trigger thing. And this one is the one that's going to give me the most pause, I think, particularly for the kids that are not going into university on our relationship as a family with food. Is there greater benefit to how we can experience this? I'm comfortable with how we cook, but is there a way that we can experience to create more confidence? My favorite thing for Lori, and I'm sure you wrote down the exact same thing, was give your kids their own tools. This is your tools in the kitchen, and that, whenever you see ownership, I mentioned my 8-year-old a couple of weeks ago. She has a little lemonade stand, and she grabs stuff. So I think what I'll do very simply is before the end of the week is just go out and get her own measuring cups and her own pieces, and then make a little tiny area for her so she can do the prep for it, because right now her lemonade tastes terrible. Please don't let anybody be dissuaded from going out and buying that fantastic lemonade. But I think ultimately that's a really good thing. But on a larger scale, this is really going to cause me to sit down and go, okay, you have an 18-year-old who's heading off to university who 2 years ago won a rib eating contest at a is it, and I remember at the time when I posted, I'm like, am I proud? Or is this an opportunity to do a bit of a reset? Is this an opportunity to look at this and find a better relationship with food?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
What about you? What did you learn?
For me, it was the conversation with Lori, but then it was also just all the reading that I did, and I'm not sure if we said this on air or not, but it's preparing for these shows. You kind of are able to take a step back and really look at yourself and analyze how you are doing in parenting. And so the one that I know that I was struggling with is having the family meal every week. And so, and now that I read everything, I am more committed to bringing us back to the table and figuring out how to make it happen. It may not be able to be dinner all the time because of the practice schedule. So maybe it's going to be breakfast as well. And so just trying to find time for us to come together a little bit more, just because of all the studies and the benefits that come out of it. So that's something that I'm really taking away, and I'm going to just keep working on. I want to tag
up on something you just said, because this is really interesting to me, this idea of breakfast.
Yeah, why not?
Spending the time together at breakfast. Mm-hmm. I find that I'm in the kitchen prepping coffee, and the kids are either making breakfast or I'm making breakfast for them and that sort of stuff. But I think that's a really, a really interesting way.
Yeah.
I recently heard professional talk about recognition, like in a corporate sense, saying, the best time to do recognition is at the beginning of a project. You don't want to do it at the end because it's too late to affect anything. Is the idea of kind of bonding over breakfast becomes a really interesting way to kick off a day. I really like that a lot.
Yeah, it was something. So I'm not sure if I've ever said, but I have a weekly newsletter that goes out to working moms. And this was something that was, I had said that I was struggling with dinners. It was a couple weeks ago that I had shared this struggle that I was having. And that was one of the pieces that came back was they were like, well, why are you trying to force dinner when you're not there? And so someone had suggested having breakfast. And I haven't tried it yet, so we'll see how September goes. Because that's when, right now everything's with camp and we're all over the place. But in September, we'll see if we can do breakfast as well and try that as the meal that we
By the
come
way,
together.
one of my fastest, easiest, and most fruitful things that I make for breakfast for the kids is our own version of Egg McMuffin because it's super fast. We have like one of those little rings. It's cracking, they crack the egg in. It's made really quickly. You can add some nutritious elements to it like red pepper or things like that, but they tend to react to that really well. And I feel better. I do. I actually feel better if the kids walk out with a good, strong protein-based breakfast to be able to kind of drive them for the day. My son wasn't eating breakfast, and I know there's the old adage, and I've heard different thoughts about it, about breakfast being the most important part of the day. But what it does to help is, if you're into intermittent fasting, if you're into whatever it is that you're into, that breakfast becomes the mold for everything. I've told them there are 3 perfect foods, and there are more, but the 3 that I really get them to focus on that are simple are almonds, blueberries, and eggs. And those 3 can create an extraordinary, can get you through from like the time you wake up until 4 p.m. can keep you full and help you from making poor decisions around nutrition. I always find that I eat perfectly from the time that I wake up until I open the beer at 5:30 or 6 p.m. And then all bets are off. But knowing that, I've been trying to pass that along to the kids for sure.
Yeah. I was starting the day off with a good breakfast. My youngest daughter doesn't always enjoy breakfast, so I try not to force it because I know that her lunch bag is packed with food, and so when she's hungry, she will eat. Trying to lessen up control there. But
what's your go-to thing? Like, what's the one thing that you're kind of known for food-wise that your kids really look forward to and all that sort of stuff?
Pasta.
But any type of pasta specifically? Are you a big gnocchi person? Or?
Oh, gnocchi is just, gnocchi's heaven.
You should see her face in the booth right now. It's like, this is the best.
It's the best. Last week, my kids were away, and so I made myself, just me, it was like this beautiful little moment of self-care, a plate of gnocchi with brown butter and sage sauce, and it was like delicious, and I'm still tasting it. But yeah, it really is just pasta. I think the one that they are loving right now, I make this pesto that is half Swiss chard, half basil, and especially now we're growing the basil, so it's really, really fresh. And I freeze the pesto, so it's like a 30-minute meal, not even. Just enough time to boil the pasta and then throw and melt over the pesto, and they love it.
That's amazing. Our house, by the way, is, believe it or not, of all of the things that we've really gotten into from a food perspective, is great cheese. So there's a new place, fromagerie in Newmarket, and we go there like once a week, and we pick out a couple, and we go to a bakery and we get fresh bread and all that sort of stuff. And so that's become a thing that we've really, really enjoyed. In fact, the dog is starting to try and enjoy it too. He's trying to get in there on the cheese. Last week we went in and I'm like, "Where's the blue cheese that was on the cutting board a minute ago?" And then the dog is like smacking his lips. I'm like, "All right, time to yell." So there you go.
Yeah.
Now, we've got a whole new website, right, at Parents Canada.
Yes.
We've got some resources for everybody if you want to learn more about that relationship that you have with kids and food. So you want to tee all that up?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so the one that I really loved was the benefits of eating as a family. That one really struck me. So please get to parentscanada.com and take a read of that. But there's a few others too. How do you know you don't like it if you've never tried it? That's something I think parents, especially of toddlers, are struggling with.
It's tattooed on our foreheads, I'm going to tell you.
Yeah. And then how to get toddlers to help in the kitchen. And if there's one last thing I could say is of the gadgets for toddlers, it's to get a step stool so that they can get to counter height.
That's a great one.
Yeah. So get on over to parentscanada.com.
Wow. Again, another hour's just flown by. And, as always, we're hopeful that we left you with some of that big thinking, some of that back porch 70-year-old thinking where you're thinking to yourself, how am I approaching these sorts of things? Because I think it's a great way to begin a conversation around these things. We're going to be back next week with a whole bunch more great stuff. In the meantime, come find us. We're on @ParentsCanada, and that's on Instagram and Facebook and Twitter. You can call us in next week as well. My name is Jason Thompson.
And I'm Lisa Durante.
You've been listening to Parents Canada Talk Radio on News Talk, Saga 960.